I broke my arm falling in the kitchen, slipped on grease I didn't spill, cooking a dinner I didn't plan, in a house that wasn't mine. The crack of bone was loud, but not louder than my daughter-in-law's laughter. She stood there filming me. My pain turned into content, my gasp into background noise. My son didn't rush to help. He asked if it was really that bad. After years of helping them pay bills, babysitting on short notice, and quietly covering gaps they never acknowledged, I realized I hadn't just fallen. I'd been dropped. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The evening had settled into a familiar stillness, the kind that always seemed to wrap itself around the Sacramento suburbs just after sunset. Outside, the crickets were beginning their slow chorus, but inside Dean and Kylie's kitchen, all Margot could hear was the soft sizzle of green beans cooking on the stove. She stirred them absently, the wooden spoon moving in small mechanical circles. Her lower back ached from standing too long, but she didn't say anything. She never did. Dinner hadn't been planned. Not by her anyway. Kylie had texted around 4 o'clock. "Can you cook something? I've had a day, lol." And Margot, without protest, had driven over, groceries in hand, trying not to feel like the live-in help. She told herself she didn't mind. She told herself it was just one meal. She took a half step to the side to check the oven timer when her foot suddenly lost traction. The moment happened all at once and somehow in slow motion. Her sneakers slid out from under her, skidding across the smooth tile floor slicked with a thin, nearly invisible sheen of grease. Her left arm flailed midair, her right side pitched forward, and her body twisted in a way no 69-year-old body ever should. There was a sharp, hideous snap as her wrist hit the floor, followed by a thud that seemed to shake the cabinets. The pain was immediate and breath-stealing, not dull or delayed like in the movies. It tore through her like an electric wire had been threaded through bone. "Oh my God," Kylie said from somewhere behind her. But her voice wasn't filled with fear or concern. It was the kind of giddy, amused shock reserved for reality TV and prank videos. "That was insane," Margot gasped, her face contorted in agony, her mouth dry from the pain. Her right arm lay pinned awkwardly beneath her, and she didn't dare move it. It looked wrong, bent in a direction no limb should go. And then she heard it. A chuckle, then another. She craned her neck just enough to see Kylie standing a few feet away, phone raised, recording. "You just totally wiped out, Margot. I mean, damn. We're posting this on Fail Friday. It's too good," Margot's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding against the scream she wanted to let loose. She tried to push herself up with her left arm, but her wrist gave out, a bolt of pain ripping through her shoulder. Dean appeared in the doorway a moment later, holding a can of sparkling water, looking mildly interested, as if he'd walked into a YouTube ad. "What happened?" "She fell," Kylie said between laughs. "Like hard." "I caught the whole thing." Dean raised an eyebrow but didn't move. "You okay, Mom?" I think I broke my wrist," Margot managed to say. Her voice was thin and hoarse, like it was escaping her instead of being spoken. "Please, I need to go to urgent care." Dean looked at his watch. "Is it really that bad?" She stared at him, unblinking. Her son, her only child, watching her tremble on the floor like she was a broken appliance that could wait for a warranty call. Kylie was still filming. "God, this is brutal but hilarious. Sadie's gonna lose it." From the hallway, Sadie's small voice broke through the discomfort. "Is Nana okay?" She stood frozen near the pantry, backpack still on, her expression a mixture of fear and confusion. No one answered her. Kylie waved the phone in her daughter's direction. "Smile, babe. Come be in the video." Sadie didn't move. Instead, she disappeared into the kitchen and returned moments later with a dish towel and a bag of frozen peas. She knelt beside Margot, eyes wide, and gently placed the cold pack on her wrist, covering it with the towel like she'd seen on TV. Margot gave her a faint smile through the pain. "Thank you, sweetheart." Sadie just nodded. quietly sitting beside her on the cold tile as the minutes dragged on. 40 minutes passed before Dean finally relented and offered to drive her to urgent care. No one apologized. No one looked at her directly. Kylie had already moved on, sitting on the couch, scrolling through the video and adding music to the background. At the clinic, as the nurse examined her swollen wrist and asked what happened, Dean answered casually, "She slipped while cooking. She's kinda clumsy sometimes." Margot said nothing, not because she agreed, because she had started remembering. And this time, she wasn't going to forget. The X-ray technician didn't speak much. He just nodded toward the metal table and waited while the nurse helped Margot ease into position. The movement alone brought tears to her eyes. Her wrist throbbed with a savage rhythm, and her left arm, though still functioning, tingled unpleasantly from the way she'd fallen. She kept her mouth shut, even as fresh pain threatened to drag sound from her throat. It took 2 angles and 3 images before the tech stepped behind the screen and said flatly, "You're not walking out of here without a cast." The physician confirmed it moments later. A displaced radial fracture in her dominant arm and a soft tissue sprain in the opposite wrist. Not the worst he'd seen, he assured her, but pretty nasty for someone her age. "She's lucky," he added with a clipboard in hand. "Older patients don't always bounce back so well." Margot nodded, lips pressed tight. No one said it out loud, but it hung between them. She had fallen hard, and someone had let her stay there. The casting process was slow, clinical, and uncomfortable. Plaster warmed and hardened around her right arm as she stared blankly at the wall. The pain only dulled now by prescription medication that made her thoughts soft around the edges. Her phone buzzed in her purse, unanswered. When she was finally wheeled into the lobby, Dean stood up slowly like he'd just been interrupted during a nap. He reached for her purse, but didn't ask about her arm. Outside, the air was heavy and dry. The sun had dropped below the horizon, but the pavement still radiated heat. As they approached the curb, a small silver sedan pulled up with its hazard lights blinking. Verna stepped out, crisp and composed. Her hair was pulled into its usual no-nonsense bun, and she wore one of those "I'm retired but still smarter than everyone here" blazers. She didn't greet Dean. She walked straight to Margot, assessed the cast, and opened the passenger door. "Come on," she said gently. "You're not going back there tonight." Dean blinked. "Wait, Mom's staying with you?" Verna gave him a flat stare. "You have kids. You don't need another dependent." Margot didn't argue. She allowed herself to be settled into the front seat, her good hand gripping the door frame as she eased down. Her body hurt in more places than she could count. As Verna pulled away from the curb, Dean stayed on the sidewalk, hands on his hips, looking annoyed. Not guilty, annoyed. In the quiet of the car, Margot let out a slow breath. Verna didn't ask questions, didn't fill the silence. Instead, once they hit a red light, she handed Margot her phone. "You should see this," she said. Margot didn't want to, but she looked anyway. The video Kylie had recorded was now on her Instagram story. It had a sparkly font banner that read, "Nana versus Gravity." Below it was the sound of Margot's fall, played over a sped-up version of a viral pop song. Kylie's voice giggled in the background, punctuated by Sadie's brief, muffled, "Is Nana okay?" It had 6,400 views. Margot stared at the number like it was written in blood. "Take a screenshot," Verna said. "Then call me tomorrow. I'll help you file." "I don't want to make trouble," Margot said quietly, though the words felt foreign in her mouth even as she spoke them. Verna's voice was calm but firm. "This isn't trouble. This is documentation. And I'm not letting you play martyr while people turn your pain into content." The next morning, Margot returned to urgent care, not as a patient, but as someone filing an official incident report. She requested a full printed copy of her records and asked the receptionist to notarize her visit documentation. They gave her a manila envelope stamped in red ink. Patient copy, confidential. She didn't tell Dean she had done it. She didn't tell Kylie anything at all. But when she returned to her own house that afternoon, her small, neatly kept single story on a quiet street lined with lemon trees, she began quietly packing a few boxes. Not much, just the essentials, the stuff she'd left over there to make things easier. A few days later, Dean texted her late in the evening. "Kylie didn't mean anything by it. Can we not make this weird?" Margot stared at the message for a full minute before locking her phone and placing it screen down on the counter. She pulled out a spiral-bound notebook from a drawer, one with a navy blue cover, unlined, the kind she used to buy in bulk when she worked at the law office. She dated the first page, then she began writing, slowly and deliberately, in her left hand. Day 1. Details of injury. Verbal and emotional response of present witnesses. Video record exists. Medical proof obtained. By the time the sun set, she'd filled 4 pages. The early morning light filtered through the kitchen blinds, casting thin stripes of sunlight across Margot's countertop. She sat at the small round table where her husband used to drink his morning coffee, a notepad in front of her, her casted arm resting gently on a pillow to her right. The house was quiet, deliberately so. She had left the TV off, her phone in another room, and her thoughts unclouded. She opened her laptop and signed into her credit union's website. Her movements slower now, not just because of the cast, but because of the weight she carried inside her chest. It had been gnawing at her for days, long before the fall, long before the video. Something had felt off. Her monthly budget didn't seem to stretch the way it used to, and she'd caught herself brushing it off. Groceries are up, gas is up, everything's up. But that explanation no longer sat right with her. Not after the look Dean gave her outside urgent care. Not after Kylie's laughter. Not after the silence that followed. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. Then, with quiet determination, she navigated to her bank statements, month by month, backward through time. What began as a check turned into a pattern. There was a recurring auto pay to a vehicle leasing company, Midtown Motor Finance, one she didn't recognize. It had been running quietly every 30 days for just under a year. $412.17, like clockwork. Another charge, less regular but still frequent, came from a child care management platform, then another, a gym membership. She hadn't belonged to a gym since water aerobics shut down during COVID. A creeping heat spread beneath her skin. She leaned in and clicked on the Zelle tab. There they were. Rows of small casual transactions sent to a shared contact, Kylie Ellis, with memo lines like, "Aaron's snacks, utilities split back pay for daycare. Thanks again." Each one was tiny enough to avoid triggering suspicion, but together they told a different story, one she hadn't signed off on. Her breath caught. Last summer, she'd had a migraine bad enough to knock her out for nearly 2 days. It had come on fast. Blurred vision, nausea, light sensitivity. Dean had stopped by with Kylie, unprompted, and offered to help her get her bills in order. They sat at this very kitchen table while she lay on the couch with an ice pack and her sunglasses on, unable to keep her eyes open. Dean had logged into her accounts. Kylie had said, "We'll just streamline things a bit." At the time, Margot had been too sick to argue. Now, she felt the tremor of something else entirely. She pulled a yellow legal pad from her drawer and began writing. Unauthorized transactions. Initial list. Then she picked up the phone with her left hand and dialed Verna's number from memory. Verna answered on the second ring. That was fast. Margot's voice was quiet. Controlled. "They've been using my accounts." There was a pause on the other end. "How bad?" Margot glanced at the screen again, her stomach turning. Systemic. By the time Verna arrived that afternoon, Margot had already printed her last 12 months of statements, highlighting every suspicious charge with a neon pink marker. The pages were spread across the kitchen table, anchored by a coffee mug and a ceramic salt shaker. Verna leaned over, adjusting her glasses, scanning the data like a crime scene analyst. "Dean's paying off a lease with your money, and that's not his gym. That's Kylie's Pilates place. I recognize the name. Margot didn't speak. Verna looked up at her. You were scammed. By your own family. The word stung, but it also clarified something. It wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud. Margot turned back to her laptop and opened a new browser tab. Her fingers hovered again, but there was no hesitation this time. She typed, Credit Union Fraud Department, contact. Then she clicked the number, pressed the speaker button, and waited. A calm, automated voice greeted her. If you believe your account has been compromised, press 2. She pressed it. The storm that hit Sacramento that weekend wasn't violent, just persistent. It soaked everything in a steady, whispering drizzle. Wet sidewalks, blurred window panes. The driveway outside Margot's house, where a windblown Trader Joe's receipt clung to the wheel well of her car. Inside, Margot sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by stacks of paper files, accordion folders, and brittle manila envelopes that hadn't been touched in years. Her cast rested atop a throw pillow, carefully propped against the edge of the ottoman. She was moving slowly, deliberately, her left hand tugging open drawer after drawer from the teak filing cabinet she and her late husband had bought in the 90s from a going-out-of-business law supply store. She wasn't looking for anything new. She was looking to confirm what she already knew. The file marked estate and legal had been in the same spot for years, wedged between mortgage, closed, and Alfred's pensions. It held their wills, medical directives, and the durable power of attorney Margot had finalized with her attorney 2 years after Alfred passed. She knew exactly what that original POA looked like. She remembered signing it in blue ink at the lawyer's office. She remembered what blouse she wore that day. So when she opened the folder and found a different document, one with a crisp black header and her name typed beneath Dean's, her pulse stuttered. She didn't remember this. And the signature, her own supposedly, was too neat, too uniform, the way the T crossed perfectly, like someone trying hard to imitate careful handwriting. But it didn't feel like hers, not down to the slant, not the pressure, and certainly not the date, last August. The same month Dean and Kylie had helped her clean up her bills. She stared at it, willing it to become less horrifying. It didn't. When Verna arrived 20 minutes later with her usual tote bag and umbrella, Margot handed her the document in silence. Verna sat down, pulled out a pair of half-moon reading glasses, and examined the page. "Oh, hell no," she muttered. "That's not your signature." Margot didn't respond. Verna tapped her fingernail against the page. "Look at the loop in the G of your last name. Yours doesn't hook like that, and the baseline's all wrong, tilted like a photocopy that someone nudged during printing. Do you think it's forged? I think it's manufactured. And if your lawyer didn't draft this version, we've got a bigger problem." They were in the car by noon, papers carefully sealed in a plastic file case in Margot's lap. Her attorney's office sat inside a quiet 2-story building off Folsom Boulevard, the same one she and Alfred had used for years. Tom Whitlock still practiced there, older now, slightly stooped, but still as sharp as the day he'd handled their estate plan. When he took the document from Margot's hand, he frowned before even sitting down. "I didn't draft this," he said flatly. Margot exhaled slowly, eyes shut. "So what does that mean?" Tom looked between the two women. "It means someone created a legal instrument with your name, gave your son authority over your finances, and most likely notarized it without your presence. That's a felony." Verna didn't flinch. "Can we file a complaint?" Tom nodded. "You'll want to start with a POA revocation. I'll draft one now. After that, file a notary fraud complaint with the Secretary of State. Then we freeze this thing before they do anything worse." An hour later, Margot stood at the counter of her bank with a freshly notarized revocation of power of attorney in her hand. The branch manager, a woman younger than Sadie's teacher, took the paperwork seriously, flagging the old POA and marking it as rescinded across all internal systems. Her accounts were no longer linked to Dean. No access, no permissions. Margot felt like she could breathe for the first time in weeks. but the air didn't taste like relief. It tasted like preparation. Back in Verna's car, the heater humming softly, Margot stared out at the rain-slicked road and whispered, "He made a legal decision with my name." "He made a mistake," Verna corrected, voice low. "You're not going to let him get away with it, are you?" Margot shook her head. "No, not this." Tom had referred her to someone before they left, a state-appointed financial abuse investigator who worked closely with elder fraud victims. Quiet, thorough, well-respected. His name was Russell Cho. Verna scrolled through her phone until she found the contact. Cho works with the elder fraud unit in the county. If you want this documented right, if you want every dollar, every signature, every lie traced, he's your guy. Russell Cho's handshake was firm, but brief. He didn't waste words. He didn't ask how Margot was feeling or offer empty sympathy. He simply motioned toward the chair across from his desk, opened a leather-bound case file, and began taking notes with a fountain pen that glided silently across the page. His office sat inside the county administration building on G Street. Windowless, utilitarian, and exactly the kind of place where the real damage control happened. No marble floors, no receptionist with a fake smile, just government carpet and locked file cabinets. Margot handed him a copy of her POA revocation, the bank statements Verna had helped her print, and the notary complaint she'd filed the day before. Her cast peeked out from beneath her sleeve, resting lightly on a folder labeled Personal Affairs, Legal. Cho reviewed each document carefully, his eyes moving back and forth like a scanner. He didn't interrupt, didn't flinch. When he finished, he looked up. "Are you authorizing a full forensic audit?" Margot didn't hesitate. "Yes. I want everything traced, every cent, every login, every document they touched." Cho nodded once, wrote the word full in the top margin of his notes, and slid a packet of forms across the desk. "We'll need you to sign these to allow access to your full financial records and any shared online platforms. This includes devices, email, and cloud accounts." Margot picked up the pen with her left hand and signed each line, her handwriting smaller and more deliberate than usual. With each signature, something inside her grew more still, like a storm eye finding its own center. That afternoon, while Russell Cho began his audit in a quiet room down the hall, Margot sat in her car outside the Wells Fargo branch on Madison Avenue. The windshield wipers dragged across the glass in slow, steady arcs. Rain had returned, tapping lightly against the roof. She pulled out her phone and, out of habit or masochism, opened Instagram. Kylie had posted a reel earlier that morning, one of her talking into the camera with a ring light, perfectly framing her face. She wore a peach-colored hoodie and a messy bun, her voice half pouting, half laughing. So apparently, some boomers still don't understand how online banking works. Like, honey, if your account's acting weird, maybe it's time to let the next generation help. You're not being hacked. You're just old. Margot stared at the screen without blinking. Thousands of views, hundreds of likes, dozens of laughing emojis. She closed the app. Then she walked into the bank. Inside, she met with a senior account manager and handed over the same folder she'd brought to Cho, now with a few additional pages. The woman behind the desk raised her eyebrows as she read the documentation. "Would you like to remove all authorized users?" the manager asked. "Yes," Margot replied. "Effective immediately. Anyone in particular?" "Dean Ellis, my son." The woman nodded and made a series of keystrokes. One by one, Margot revoked every shared authorization. Checking, savings, brokerage sweep. She changed all PINs and passwords, replacing old ones with strings only she would remember. Dates that meant something only to her. Not anniversaries, not birthdays. The day she passed the bar exam. The first time she made it through a deposition without blinking. Once the accounts were cleared and new cards were ordered, she opened a separate account entirely, one in her name only, tied to a new debit card and security key. The final step came at the front desk of the Sacramento Police Department the following morning. She walked in with a copy of her revocation, a signed affidavit from her attorney, and a new folder labeled Financial Exploitation. Dean and Kylie Ellis. The officer on duty took her statement with quiet focus, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When he saw the forged POA and the Zelle transfers, he paused. "You said your son accessed these accounts while you were sedated?" Margot nodded. "We'll file this under Penal Code 368D. That covers elder financial abuse. You'll get a case number once it's logged." Margot didn't flinch. "Would you like us to flag the notary too?" "I already did," she said. "This is just the follow-up." The first call came just after sunrise. Margot was seated on her back patio, wrapped in a flannel shawl, sipping tea with her cast resting atop a folded towel on the table. The fog still clung to the treetops, and a crow somewhere overhead let out a single, sharp cry. Her phone buzzed. Dean Ellis, mobile. She let it ring twice before answering, more out of curiosity than compassion. "Mom," Dean snapped. No greeting, no pause. "What the hell did you do?" She didn't answer. "You froze my account," he continued, breath shallow, voice high with disbelief. "My card got declined. I can't access anything. Kylie can't even schedule a lift." Margot stared out at her lemon tree, where the last of the summer fruit had gone soft and yellow. "You froze my life," Dean spat. She spoke calmly, her voice clear. "No, I secured mine." There was a silence that thudded like a door closing. He tried again, voice slipping into something more desperate. "Look, I know things got messed up. Maybe we didn't talk enough about the money stuff, but you didn't have to take it this far." Margot set her mug down gently. "You forged my signature, Dean." His breath hitched audibly through the line. "I didn't, Mom, I swear. Kylie was just trying to—" He stopped himself. "We thought you needed help. You were overwhelmed." "No," she said. "I was vulnerable, and you took advantage." Before he could say another word, she ended the call. The voicemails began less than an hour later. Most were from Kylie, who oscillated between tearful apologies and venom-laced accusations. "You've ruined our lives, Margot. Do you even care about what this is doing to your grandchildren?" In another, "This is elder abuse, against us. You're punishing us financially because you don't like how we parent." And then, in a voice so wet with tears it barely held together, "I looked up to you. I respected you. And now you're acting like we're criminals. We're your family." Margot listened to none of them all the way through. She saved them to a labeled folder on her desktop. Voicemail recordings, September. Later that day, she drove to her estate attorney's office in Fair Oaks, the same desk. The same woman she'd used since Alfred passed. But this time, there was no nostalgia. Just clean lines, clear language, and the sharp strike of a pen signing over revision after revision. Dean and Kylie were officially removed from the will. No more joint executor titles. No conditional distributions. No trust stipends for life expenses. She adjusted the disbursement for Sadie, more generous now, but protected. Held in trust until her mid-20s, with an educational clause and built-in oversight. The clause at the end was new. Any attempt to contest this document by any named or previously named party shall result in full forfeiture of all claims. That night, Verna came by after dinner. She brought a toolkit and a boxed ring camera still sealed in plastic. "Time to close the gates," she said simply. They worked in quiet rhythm, Verna on the ladder adjusting the fixture above the porch, Margot sitting on the front steps, managing setup on her tablet. When the camera blinked to life and began its soft mechanical rotation, Margot felt a small coil of tension inside her unspool. "You're changing the locks next," Verna added. "I already scheduled it." They didn't talk much after that. They didn't need to. Later, as Margot folded laundry with one hand and the sound of the dryer droned low in the background, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text. "Sadie, I miss you. Are you mad at me?" The words broke something open in her. Margot sat on the edge of the bed, Her folded towel paused in her lap. The overhead light flickered faintly, casting the room in soft amber. She typed slowly, deliberately. Margot, never you. I'm just cleaning house. The morning Russell Cho arrived at Margot's house, he was 15 minutes early and dressed in an unmarked windbreaker, plain slacks, and dark sneakers. He carried no briefcase, just a slim manila folder tucked beneath one arm and a quiet look that suggested he wasn't in the business of speculation. Margot greeted him at the door, her cast now covered in a protective sleeve. Verna sat at the kitchen table behind her, sipping black coffee like a sentry. "Let's sit somewhere private," Cho said after a quick hello. "There's a lot to go over." They gathered in the dining room, blinds drawn halfway, a legal pad ready in front of Margot. Cho pulled out a printed timeline, 4 pages long, stapled at the corner and marked in crisp color-coded rows. "This," he said, laying it gently in front of her, "is the sequence of digital activity tied to your financial accounts over the last 18 months. Everything from logins to device fingerprints to IP tracking." He tapped the first entry, a login from Margot's iPad, time-stamped the day of her oral surgery last October. "You were under sedation that morning?" "Yes. General anesthesia for a root canal. I was out most of the day," she confirmed. Cho nodded. "Your son logged into your bank account at 11:17 a.m. from your own device, using a browser session that had been cleared right before access. That's important." Whoever did this wiped the previous history first. Margot didn't speak. She didn't need to. Verna leaned forward slightly. "We cross-referenced the IP address used that day with the router at Dean and Kylie's residence," Cho continued. "There's a 96% match. Combine that with the signature on the POA, the notary complaint, and the Zelle trail. It's a clean line." He slid a separate page across the table. It was a formal statement, pre-typed but with blanks for dates and a signature at the bottom. "This is your sworn statement confirming that you did not authorize access or changes to your financial portfolio during the period of October through December last year." Margot picked up the pen with her left hand and signed slowly, deliberately. "Is this enough to press charges?" she asked, her voice steady. Cho didn't smile, but his voice was calm. "It's enough to escalate." An hour later, Margot faxed a copy of the notarized POA revocation and her statement to the district attorney's office downtown. Cho had already submitted a separate affidavit to accompany her case file. Clean, concise, and written in the kind of language that didn't leave room for misunderstanding. At home that evening, Margot sat at her desk and created a new folder in her filing cabinet. She typed out a fresh label on her brother label maker. "Final push, active case." Inside, she placed the forensic audit timeline, her notarized revocation, the police report, Cho's official investigator summary, a printed screenshot of Kylie's boomer banking video with the date and time stamped in bold. The cabinet drawer closed with a soft click, but it sounded like a seal locking into place. 2 days later, the subpoenas went out. Dean and Kylie received theirs via certified mail. Summons for deposition under California Elder Abuse Statute, CAR 368D, with an advisory clause citing criminal intent. Verna texted a screenshot of Kylie's reaction, posted on her private story before she realized Margot could still see it. It was just a photo of the subpoena envelope, resting on a granite counter. Caption: "Apparently suing your parents is the new love language. No denial, no apology. Just spin." That night, Margot sat on her patio again. The cast now uncovered, her hands stronger, her back straighter. Verna brought over tea and 2 oatmeal cookies in a wax paper bag. Neither woman said much. They didn't have to. The wind was shifting. Not metaphorically, literally. A sharp, dry breeze had pushed in from the valley, sending the lemon tree's branches dancing in clean directional movements. No more soft fog, no more clinging mist. The knock came mid-afternoon, not pounding, not hesitant. Just 3 short, sharp raps on the front door that carried the unmistakable rhythm of entitlement. Margot didn't flinch. She paused the spreadsheet she'd been reviewing, Cho's deposition prep outline. and walked quietly to the entryway. Through the side window, she could see Kylie on the porch, arms crossed, eyebrows already lifted, lips pinched in tight calculation. Margot unlocked the door, but didn't open it all the way. She stepped outside and closed it behind her. The Ring camera's soft blue glow blinked quietly above the door frame. Kylie didn't look tired or upset. She looked styled. Full lashes, flawless foundation, nails freshly painted. "This has gone too far," Kylie said, loud enough to carry past the roses lining the front walkway. "You had no right to drag us into some investigation just because you're mad." Margot didn't answer. She didn't even raise her chin. "You want attention. You want the neighbors to see this, because trust me, they will. You're making yourself look crazy, Margot." Kylie shifted her weight, a calculated move that made her voice waver slightly. "Dean's trying to fix this quietly. You could have just picked up the phone instead of acting like some paranoid." Margot raised a hand, palm out, and pointed up to the Ring camera. Kylie followed the gesture, eyes locking with the lens. "We're done here," Margot said calmly. Kylie's smile fractured. Her nostrils flared. For a moment, she seemed ready to scream. Right there on the porch, in full view of passing cars and dog walkers. But instead, she turned on her heel and marched to her car, yanking open the door so hard it bounced back and nearly caught her leg. Margot waited until the SUV peeled away, tires screeching slightly on the curve. Then she walked back inside, closed the door, and opened the Ring app on her phone. The footage was crystal clear, every word, every threat, every flicker of practiced outrage preserved in high definition. By sundown, Kylie's social media lit up again. A story post, filtered in soft pink, text overlaid on an old photo of Margot holding Sadie as a toddler. "My mill is acting senile. We're really worried about her mental state. Please pray." Another post followed an hour later, just a black screen with a single line of white text. "Sometimes the most toxic people are the ones who smile to your face the longest." Margot took screenshots of both and added them to the folder labeled Harassment, Public Narrative. That evening, Verna arrived with a USB drive and the number for a local attorney who specialized in civil protection orders. "She's not going to stop unless someone stops her," Verna said, pouring herself a cup of peppermint tea. "She's trying to rewrite the story while you're still living in it." Together, they drafted a cease and desist letter, attaching the Ring footage, social posts, and an annotated incident timeline compiled by Cho. "Send it tomorrow by courier," Verna said. "Don't email it. Let it arrive with weight." They sat in silence for a while after, the only sound the gentle hum of Margot's refrigerator. Later that night, after Verna had gone, Margot's phone rang. "Sadie." Margot answered immediately, her voice soft. "Hi, sweetheart." Sadie sniffled into the line. "Mom says, she says you're trying to get us evicted, that you're making it so we can't live here anymore." Margot felt her heart pull in two directions. "No," she said gently. "I'm protecting myself, Sadie. And maybe protecting you too." Sadie was quiet on the other end, her breathing uneven. "I don't want us to fight." "We're not," Margot said. "You and I? We're not." The line stayed open for another 30 seconds before Sadie whispered, "Okay," and hung up. Margot stared at the screen long after the call ended. It started with a card decline. Dean stood in the checkout line at Costco, a 48-pack of diapers and a rotisserie chicken already bagged. He swiped once. The register beeped. Declined. He tried again, then again. The line behind him grew impatient. "Try another card," the cashier said politely. He didn't have another. That was his card, the joint one Margot had opened when they were helping her with bills. He left the cart, walked to the parking lot, and called Kylie. Inside a boutique spa in Folsom, Kylie was midway through booking her weekly LED facial when her app crashed. She tapped it twice, then again, finally hitting the Reconnect account prompt. A spinning wheel blinked on the screen. Then an error message appeared in bright red. "Unable to access payment method. Please contact your bank." She didn't call the bank. She called Margot. The call went unanswered. 2 hours later, they tried the joint checking account. Nothing. Locked. A banner appeared on their online banking dashboard in all caps. Temporarily restricted. Fraud investigation pending. Margot didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table with a thick folder open in front of her and a pen in her left hand, methodically crossing out every name that had ever had access to her finances. Her handwriting was clean, sharp. She had always been a lefty for truth. A week later, Kylie received an automated notice from Bright Steps Preschool. Sadie's younger brother had been withdrawn for non-payment. Margot had unknowingly been covering tuition through a shared expense debit that had flown under her radar for months. Now it was gone, and with it, their childcare. That night, Kylie posted a GoFundMe. The title read, "Help Us Survive Unfair Legal Attacks from Family." The story underneath painted a masterpiece of misdirection. Margot as a confused, paranoid grandmother, manipulated by outside voices. Dean as a hard-working father, stripped of access to his own finances. And Sadie as the child caught in the crossfire of generational cruelty. It gained 220 shares in 48 hours, $350 raised, then $540, then $712, until the flag hit. Verna filed it, along with 5 pages of documentation, screenshots, and a PDF of the ongoing elder abuse investigation case number. Within 36 hours, the page was removed for fraudulent or misleading claims. Kylie went silent for 2 days after that. Dean didn't. He sent Margot a single email. "Hope you're happy. You've made us beggars." She didn't reply. She was too busy revising her trust. It was a quiet Saturday when she sat across from her estate attorney again, her cast now off, her hand slow but steady. The lawyer opened her file and raised an eyebrow when he saw the newest instructions. "I want Verna named as both my financial and medical power of attorney," Margot said, "effective immediately." "You're sure? She's been more of a daughter than anyone else has been a son." The lawyer made no comment, just nodded and began typing. Margot sat taller now. Her posture had changed in the weeks since the fall. Her voice no longer broke when she spoke, and she no longer flinched at her own memories. That version of her was gone. She signed the updated documents and placed them into a new fireproof folder labeled 2025, Final Legal Revisions. Verna drove them home in her Prius, quiet jazz humming from the stereo. At a red light, Verna said, "Kylie's not done. She'll try to twist this again." "She can try," Margot replied. "But now there's nothing to take." Verna gave a small nod. "Except your silence. And I don't think she'll get that either." Back home, Margot placed the new POA documents in her filing cabinet, right above the folder marked Final Push, Active Case. She stood for a long moment with both drawers open, then shut them with quiet finality. The civil attorney's office sat in a converted Craftsman on 34th Street, its porch lined with mismatched planters and 2 faded rocking chairs that swayed in the breeze. But inside, everything was modern, polished floors, frosted glass doors, and a conference room with walls lined in law journals and soft gray soundproofing panels. Margot sat at one end of the oval table, her folder already open, her fingers tracing the edge of the page where Russell Cho's audit summary began. Across from her, Lauren Meyer, sharp-jawed, late 40s, and known for taking elder exploitation cases to verdict, tapped a highlighter against her notepad. "Will file for unauthorized account access, misuse of a forged legal document, and financial abuse under California Civil Code 156 Lauren said. "And we'll add emotional distress, considering the public humiliation component." She looked up. "If we prove intent, you're entitled to restitution, plus damages." Margot nodded once. "I'm not doing this for money," Lauren offered a thin smile. "Good, that tends to make us more dangerous." Over the next week, Margot made herself into a witness. She organized statements, screenshots, and receipts into color-coded tabs. Every email, every Zelle transfer, Every notarized form now lived inside a binder Verna jokingly dubbed the Gospel According to Margot. Even the ring footage had been uploaded, time-stamped, and transcribed. Kylie's porch tantrum now a piece of legal evidence, not just family drama. Then came the email. Kylie, of all people, sent it. Subject line: Apology plus. Request to resolve. The message was 3 paragraphs long, starting with a vague expression of regret. Sorry things got so tense, and ending with what read like a threat in disguise. We're willing to put this behind us and forgive what's been done if you'll agree not to escalate it further. We all make mistakes when we're stressed. Maybe peace is better than paperwork. Margot didn't respond. She simply clicked forward, typed in Lauren's email address, and hit send. By the end of the week, the mediation was scheduled. Margot showed up alone, in a soft black cardigan and her reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Kylie came with a new lawyer, one who wore red-soled heels and introduced herself like she was auditioning for a legal drama. The mediator, an older man with a calm demeanor and a clipboard full of neutrality, asked both sides to present summaries. Lauren kept hers clinical and composed. Kylie's lawyer spun hers like a PTA grievance: misunderstandings, emotional misfires, miscommunication within a family dynamic. Then Kylie leaned forward and gave the performance of her life. I just want peace, she said, hands folded like a youth pastor in crisis. We've already lost so much. Why keep going? Margot studied her in silence. The same woman who had stood on her porch and called her paranoid. The same one who mocked her online, stole from her in silence, and filmed her pain for likes. When the mediator asked if Margot had anything to say, she didn't raise her voice. She just said, "You made it public the day you laughed." No agreement was reached. Lauren closed her folder without another word. Kylie stormed out 5 minutes later, muttering to her attorney in a whisper sharp enough to cut glass. That night, the court clerk stamped the official date. March 14th. Civil Case 25C-0461. Ellis v. Ellis et al. Margot marked it on her calendar with a blue felt pen, then taped the notice to her refrigerator door like a dentist appointment. A few days later, Verna came over with a garment bag and a grin. I found it, she said, unzipping the bag to reveal a tailored blouse in a striking shade of steel gray. Strong shoulders, no buttons, no fuss, just presence. Margot ran her fingers over the fabric, then held it against her body. You'll look like a woman who doesn't get steamrolled, Verna said. Margot smiled. That's because I'm not. The courtroom was smaller than Margot expected. No echoing marble, no sweeping staircases like in the movies. Just padded benches, state flags, and the scent of too much air conditioning pushing against cheap carpet. Still, it was enough. The truth didn't need grandeur. It just needed a place to stand. She wore the steel gray blouse Verna had picked. No jewelry, no makeup. Only her reading glasses and a pair of navy blue slacks she hadn't worn since Alfred's funeral. Dean and Kylie were already seated at the defendant's table when she walked in. Kylie wore a cream blouse and an expression that had been practiced in front of a mirror. Dean looked like he hadn't slept. Verna sat beside Margot, her paralegal badge clipped neatly to her blazer. She gave Margot's hand a quiet squeeze before the clerk called the room to order. Ellis v. Ellis et al., the judge read, adjusting her glasses. This is a civil matter brought under elder financial abuse statutes. Lauren stood and introduced their side. The opening moments passed in blur, motions submitted, copies exchanged. But when the first exhibit was projected onto the screen behind the bench, time slowed. It was the ring footage. Kylie's voice echoed through the speakers. You want attention? You want the neighbors to see this? Then the screenshot from her Instagram story. My mill is acting senile. Please pray. No one in the room breathed. The judge leaned slightly forward. Was this posted during the pending investigation? Yes, Your Honor, Lauren said. It remained live for 48 hours, during which the defendants also attempted a public fundraiser based on misrepresented facts. Next came the bank records. Margot watched as the timeline Russell Cho had prepared unfolded in front of the court. Slide after slide of Zelle transfers, IP logs, browser sessions initiated while she was sedated after dental surgery. Each document had a purpose. Each number told a story. Then it was time to testify. Margot took the stand, her heart quiet, her back straight. She answered every question with steady precision, dates, sums, names. She referred to a single legal pad where she had handwritten her notes, but barely needed to look down. Her voice didn't waver. She described the fall in the kitchen, the laughter, the 40 minutes they made her wait, then the forged POA, the day she realized her money had been moved without her knowledge, the morning she called the fraud hotline. Lauren guided her carefully, but Margot didn't need hand-holding. She was ready. When it was Kylie's turn, her lawyer tried a different tactic, softness. "My client regrets deeply the emotional impact of this misunderstanding," she began, "and only acted out of concern during a difficult time." Then Kylie herself took the stand. She blinked excessively, her voice cracked at all the wrong moments. She spoke about supporting Margot through migraines and trying to simplify things for everyone's sake. She attempted tears halfway through, reaching for a tissue with theatrical flourish. The judge stared down at her with mild impatience. "You're not on trial for being emotionally complicated, Mrs. Ellis. You're here because someone moved tens of thousands of dollars from a retiree's account using forged legal authority." Kylie deflated slightly, tissue still clutched in her hand. Dean was worse. When asked about the account logins, he stammered. When asked about the POA signature, he hesitated. His timeline shifted mid-testimony. Lauren didn't need to pounce. He unraveled on his own. Margot sat quietly, watching it happen. She felt no triumph, only relief. The judge took a recess. When they returned, the courtroom was quiet, the temperature somehow cooler. "The court finds sufficient evidence to proceed with civil judgment," the judge said. "This case meets the threshold under California's elder abuse statute and the financial exploitation precedent established in O'Connor v. Mitchell." She looked toward Margot. "You will receive a judgment for restitution and legal fees. Damages to be determined in the next phase." Margot exhaled slowly. Verna reached over and took her hand. And for the first time in months, Margot didn't feel like she was bracing for impact. The judgment arrived in the mail on a Thursday. A standard white envelope, no dramatic markings, just the county seal pressed into the upper left corner, and Margot's name typed in clear, mechanical font. She opened it with the same small letter opener Alfred used to favor, its brass handle worn smooth over time. Inside, the document was concise. Final judgment, restitution awarded, $7,800, emotional damages, $25,000 legal fees, full coverage enforcement effective immediately. Margot read it once, then folded it neatly and slid it into the folder labeled Final Push. Active case, still resting in the center drawer of her filing cabinet. She didn't smile. She didn't sigh. It wasn't relief she felt. It was quiet, deliberate closure. By the weekend, the judgment had begun to circulate. Someone from the Sacramento Parent Exchange, a private Facebook group Kylie had moderated, posted screenshots of the court ruling, along with a clipped caption, "Not the kind of community leadership we need. Financial abuse isn't a misunderstanding." Kylie's admin privileges were revoked within hours. The post stayed up for nearly 3 days before moderators locked the thread. By then, the damage was done. A wellness brand Kylie had partnered with for 3 sponsored posts quietly pulled her page from their collaborator list. The affiliate code Kylie10 returned an error on checkout. Her inbox, once filled with PR boxes and skincare samples, sat silent. Meanwhile, Dean received notice from the leasing company. The Range Rover, technically registered under the co-signed agreement with Margot, was being repossessed. His credit score had dropped nearly 90 points after the financial judgment hit. Combined with the fraud flags on his bank accounts, The lease could no longer be honored. He returned the car the next morning, key fobs surrendered to a clipboard-wielding man in a parking lot. Margot didn't witness any of it. She didn't need to. She was on her porch, sipping tea, pruning her lemon tree with slow, intentional movements. Verna had brought over scones from the farmer's market and a new copy of the Durable Estate Management Guide, which they were annotating together. At noon, her doorbell rang. It wasn't Dean, it wasn't Kylie, it was the mailman, holding a manila envelope with childlike handwriting on the front. To Nana, private. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper, folded into quarters. Margot unfolded it slowly. A drawing, done in crayon, filled the page. A woman stood at the center, gray hair pulled into a bun, one arm in a cast, the other holding a wide, shining shield that blocked a messy storm of arrows and broken hearts and frowny faces. Behind her, in the background, was a small figure, brown ponytail, hands clasped, watching silently. At the top, written in crooked block letters, strong like storybooks, there was no signature, but Margot didn't need one. She knew Sadie's handwriting. She knew the way the little hearts were always just a little bit lopsided, the way her S's curled too hard at the ends. Margot sat at the kitchen table, the drawing in her lap. She didn't sob. She didn't collapse. She just cried, quietly, fully, letting each tear fall without restraint. Not from grief, not from regret, but from something closer to grace. When she dried her cheeks, she walked to the file cabinet and opened the top drawer, the one marked 2025, Final Legal Revisions. She slid the drawing into the back flap of the trust binder, behind the updated POA and living will. Then she shut the drawer. It didn't echo, it didn't slam, it just clicked shut. The new trust wasn't printed on anything flashy, just plain ivory paper with a faint watermark and a small staple in the top corner. But to Margot, it felt heavier than the last version, not because of weight, but because of clarity. She sat at her kitchen table, the same one where Dean had once offered to clean up her bills, the same one where Verna had helped highlight the audit trail, the same one where she'd once signed her name and trusted it would be enough. It hadn't been. Now she knew better. The folder was labeled in calm, confident font, 2025 Living Trust, revised in full. The first change was simple but fundamental. Dean and Kylie were gone. Not downgraded, not trimmed, removed. Every clause that once involved them, executor roles, discretionary disbursements, family home privileges, deleted. Their names no longer appeared in the distribution section. The estate would pass directly through alternate channels. And Sadie? Sadie's name had been moved to the top of the page. Her share of the estate was now protected in a conditional trust, held until her 25th birthday, with education stipends structured annually. Verna had helped her set up the clause with oversight from a third-party fiduciary, someone impartial, someone honest. Margot had also added a short paragraph in her own words. It wasn't legal language. It was human. This portion is meant to honor my granddaughter's kindness in a time of difficulty. May it serve not just as financial support, but as a reminder that doing the right thing matters. Below that, a separate section detailed new designations for medical and financial decisions. Verna was now her co-agent. Alongside Russell Cho, both listed as equal and independent proxies should Margot become incapacitated. Her lawyer had raised an eyebrow at that. You're naming a government investigator as your health proxy. He's methodical and honest. That's not exactly bedside manner, Margot smiled. I have Verna for bedside. I need someone who will fight if the time comes. Then came the clause that mattered most. Any attempt to challenge the contents of this trust shall result in complete forfeiture of all entitlements therein. It was written in bold, centered, and notarized separately. Lauren had told her the phrase was nicknamed the poison pill in estate law circles. If they touch this, she'd said, they lose everything. Even if they win on paper, they walk away with nothing. Margot had nodded. That was the point. And then there was one last addition. something neither lawyer nor Verna had suggested. A scholarship fund. Margot had drafted the outline herself. A modest endowment from her estate, designated for an annual scholarship at Sacramento State's School of Social Work. Preference would be given to students pursuing elder protection policy or adult guardianship reform. The working title, the Shield Grant. "I'm not just cleaning up my story," Margot had told Verna. "I want to help someone else stop theirs before it starts." That morning, the mobile notary arrived precisely at 10. A man in his 60s, calm and professional, with a clipboard and thick-rimmed glasses. Verna brewed fresh coffee while he reviewed the trust, his pen moving in small fluid loops. When he handed Margot the pen, she signed slowly. No rush, no tremble. She flipped each page, signed every margin, and initialed every appendix. Her name written with her newly strengthened right hand, no longer bandaged, no longer uncertain. Verna stood beside her as a witness, pride written clearly across her face. When it was done, the notary packed up his bag and wished them a good morning. Margot followed him to the door. Before he left, he turned back, smiling slightly. Most people wait until something terrible happens to update their trust. Margot tilted her head. "I did?" He paused, then nodded respectfully and left. Verna joined her at the window, watching the car pull away. "You know," Verna said, "you didn't just rewrite a trust. I know. You rewrote the ending." Margot gave a quiet smile. "I'm not at the ending yet." The sentence came to her all at once, as if it had been waiting. It didn't arrive with rage or trembling hands, just quiet finality. Margot sat at her desk in the soft afternoon light, her tea going cold beside her keyboard. The air in the room was still, the windows open just enough to let in the distant hush of wind through the trees. She opened a blank document, centered the cursor, and typed, "Your apology is noted. Your access is closed." She read it once, then she printed it. White paper, black ink. No salutation, no sign of warmth. Just the truth, short, sharp, unmoving. She signed it at the bottom in blue ink and folded the paper in thirds, sliding it into an envelope with Kylie's name written in neat block letters. She didn't seal it with anger. She sealed it with clarity. Verna watched from the kitchen as Margot walked to the mailbox and slipped the envelope through the slot. No drama. Just a small, deliberate motion, the closing of a door that had been left open too long. "Final piece?" Verna asked when Margot returned. "Final echo," Margot replied. No more replies, no more chances. Later that morning, they drove together to First Sierra Credit Union, a modest building tucked beside a strip mall with a faded taco shop and a defunct vape store. It was the last account. A joint savings opened 5 years ago, back when Margot believed that family meant shared trust. A small account, barely touched, but still tethered, still open. The teller, a woman with red glasses and a gentle voice, pulled up the profile and nodded. "We can close it today. Would you like a cashier's check?" "No," Margot said. "Just void it. It's not money I'm reclaiming. It's air." Verna smiled beside her. "Leave nothing tethered," she whispered. The teller clicked her keyboard a few more times. "All closed," she said. "You're free and clear." Free and clear. The phrase settled into Margot's chest like a heartbeat she hadn't heard in months. That afternoon, they walked the river trail. The wind was brisk and cool, curling through the eucalyptus trees and catching the edges of Margot's shawl. Verna had brought thermoses of mint tea, and they sipped as they walked. Slow, steady, with no agenda, just presence. Geese honked overhead. A cyclist passed in a blur of orange fleece. And still, the quiet between them felt like the safest place Margot had known in years. As they reached the bend in the trail, Verna asked, "Do you ever think about starting fresh, like a new chapter?" Margot smiled. "I'm not starting anything. I'm just ending what needed to end." That night, a birthday card arrived in the mail. The envelope was pale blue, addressed in a child's hand with one heart dotting the I in Nana. Inside was a folded sheet of cardstock, decorated with stickers and glitter glue stars. At the center, in Sadie's careful writing, was a single sentence. "You're my safe place." Margot's eyes stung. She traced the words with her finger and held the card to her chest. There was no mention of Kylie, no tension, just the soft, unbroken bond between two people who still believed in protection, who still believed in each other. Margot didn't cry. Instead, she walked to the cabinet, opened the small drawer beneath her truss binder, and pulled out a velvet box. Inside was a silver bracelet, simple, understated, with a narrow engraved plate at the center. The engraving read, "For shields only." She wrapped it in tissue, added a note in her neat handwriting, "To wear when you feel brave or want to," and placed both into a small padded mailer. She sealed it, addressed it, and set it by the door. Tomorrow she would send it. Tonight she would sleep. Not in anticipation, not in fear, but in peace. The photo wasn't artistic or carefully staged. It was taken by Verna, half impulsively, with the morning light still stretching across Margot's kitchen floor. Margot stood near the window, cast still visible in the shot, though now faded to a soft beige from sun and time. In her uninjured hand, she held up the judgment check. The camera had caught her mid-blink, chin tilted just slightly, the line of her jaw set not in triumph, but in quiet defiance. Verna printed it later that day and handed it over in a plain white envelope. "Not to gloat," she said, "just to remember." Margot bought a frame that afternoon, black metal, no flourishes. She hung it on the hallway wall just outside her home office, between a photo of Sadie at age 6 and a watercolor print Alfred had brought back from Mendocino. The image didn't speak loudly, but every time Margot passed it, she felt something settle inside her. Proof, not of revenge, of reclamation. The next weekend, she boxed the files. All of them. The audit trail, court documents, voicemail transcripts, copies of the forged POA and the revised trust. Even the annotated screenshots from Kylie's deleted posts. They were organized meticulously. Color-coded tabs, labeled folders, a full index list at the top of the box. She stuck a single post-it on the inside of the lid in her handwriting, in case someone needs the path. Verna helped carry the box to the storage cabinet in the garage, setting it on the top shelf next to the earthquake kit and a stack of old tax returns. As they closed the door, Verna grinned and nudged her gently. "You broke more than a bone, you know." Margot raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You broke the cycle." Margot didn't reply at first. She looked down at her arm. The scar along the forearm now softened to a pale, wandering line. "No one gets to laugh at my pain and profit from it," she said. "Not anymore." They stood there a moment longer, no triumph in their silence, just the recognition of what had passed, what had been survived. And then, a phone buzz. Margot pulled it from her cardigan pocket and smiled. "Sadie, still want to come to my concert?" Her thumbs hovered over the screen for a breath. Then she typed, "Margot. Front row." She didn't add a heart, didn't need to. That night she stepped into the bathroom, turned on the light, and examined the scar more closely. It wasn't angry anymore. Just a mark, a history, the kind you can trace with your finger and still feel whole. Her balance had returned. Her steps had steadied. She reached for the moisturizer Verna had recommended, lavender and aloe, and rubbed it gently into the skin, watching the way her arm moved with confidence now. No flinch, no hesitation. Later, after dinner and dishes and one last check on the lemon tree, she sat at her desk with her journal. She hadn't written in weeks, but tonight the words came easily. She flipped to a fresh page, uncapped her pen, and began. "I broke my arm in their kitchen, and they laughed. So I fell into their bank account, and I froze it.